joining today's educational webinar with Cancer Support Community Los Angeles. I'm Abby Espinoza, the Program Coordinator at CSCLA, and I'm honored to welcome you to this week's webinar titled Practical Tips for Easy, Tasty, and Affordable Cancer Fighting Meals. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles is a premier nonprofit organization providing vital social and emotional support to families facing cancer, including patients, caregivers, and their loved ones, all at no cost. Our programs include support groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs such as this one. If you would like to learn more about our services or watch past webinars, please visit our website at cancersupportla.org. Before I introduce today's speaker, please note that your video and microphone are automatically disabled for this webinar. You may, however, enter your questions into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom window at any time. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. We may not be able to get to all your questions today, but we'll get to as many as possible. And to introduce today's speaker, Saori Yen is a registered dietitian and board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition with a master's degree in nutritional science. As an oncology dietitian at Cedars-Sinai Cancer Patient and Family Support Program, she provides personalized nutrition counseling throughout the cancer journey. She is passionate about cultural foods and accessible evidence-based nutrition advice. It gives me great pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Saori Yen.
Thank you so much, Abby. Let me share my slides. Okay, thank you everybody for joining. There's so many of you. Feel free to put any questions that you might think of during this presentation, and I will try to get to them at the end. I'll try to leave maybe 10 to 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have. And if I don't get to them, feel free to email me. I believe they'll put my email address in the chat. Again, my name is Saori. I'm an oncology dietitian at Cedars-Sinai. Today's topic is going to be about practical tips for making easy, tasty, and affordable cancer-fighting meals. And here's a little overview. So first, we're going to talk about what a cancer-fighting eating pattern looks like. We'll review some of the cancer nutrition myth versus what's actually evidence-based at this time. And the second part, we're going to talk about practical tips for meal planning. So we'll review what to look for when you're out grocery shopping and how to build balanced meals and snacks. And the last portion, I will share some easy recipes, including smoothies that can meet your needs, how to roast any vegetables, and some sugar-free chocolate delights that's perfect for Valentine's Day coming up. So let's get started. So cancer-fighting eating pattern, cancer nutrition myth, and evidence-based versus evidence-based. I think this is a good review for everybody because there's so much cancer nutrition information out there, a lot of confusion, a lot of conflicting information. So I just want to share what to look for when you're looking for nutrition information. And of course, if you do have access to an oncology dietitian through your oncologist, I think that's the best so that you can get a personalized advice. But if you come across nutrition recommendation online or from a family or friend or something like that, something that I always recommend to look for is first the source of information, right? I think there's so much information out there, especially like on social media from influencers and things like that. Things that are just like reposted and shared, but we don't really know if that information is true. So source of information is really important. Is the person, a credible person? Is it a reputable organization? And hopefully it is. And if so, we want to think about the level of evidence. And that's where this pyramid on the right side comes into play. Because even if let's say a nutrition information or advice is evidence-based, there are definitely different levels of evidence. So on the bottom, we have here non-human studies. So those are studies done on animals or in a petri dish looking at cells. And while that's a great place to start to advance science, we don't want to jump to conclusions based on the findings from that type of study. And on top of it, we have observational studies. So that's when researchers, as it sounds, observe what's happening. Let's say, what a nutrient component might, how it might affect cancer development, things like that. So researchers are just observing, not intervening. And the green portion on top of it, interventional studies that's when researchers are comparing the control group versus the interventional group. So we're actually implementing something. So we're not just observing. So that's, findings from studies like that tend to have a higher level of evidence. And all the way at the top in yellow, we have meta-analyses and systematic reviews. Those are the types of studies where we look at many, many different similar studies and come up with a conclusion. So it's much stronger in terms of the level of evidence. Having said that, all of these studies, what they tend to look for are statistical significance or statistical difference. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, their findings are clinically relevant or clinically significant. So that means that, let's say they find that well, maybe I'll give you an example in a bit, but let's talk about the rest. So relevance and appropriateness for you is also important. Let's say they find, I don't know, intermittent fasting or ketogenic diet is good for cancer, but we want to see if that's actually appropriate and relevant for you. What did the study group look like? What types of cancer did they have? What was their, health status, their body weight? Were they in active treatment? Were they in survivorship? All of those things make a big difference. So we want to make sure we're not just, taking in and implementing information and recommendations that might not be appropriate for you. So with anything, we want to weigh out the potential benefits versus harm. Having said that, and this webinar is about practical nutrition tips about, meal planning and things like that. So I'm not going to go into too much details about this, but I just wanted to point out because these are questions I get so often. Do I need to eliminate all these food groups from my diet after a cancer diagnosis? And the good news is that you don't need to eliminate things like dairy, meat, sugar, soy, fruits, and other starches like breads, rice, pastas from your diet, but I will kind of go over them in other slides. And when it comes to, again, going back to the pyramid at the top, the meta-analyses and systematic reviews, when we look at a lot of information, different research over decades, there are recurring theme in terms of what type of eating pattern is helpful for us in terms of reducing inflammation, increasing antioxidants, and something that's cancer fighting. So that is plant-rich whole food eating pattern or diet. And that looks like a very colorful, high fiber, lean protein, low in saturated fat, low in added sugar type of eating pattern. And the good thing is that it's not just a one diet that you need to follow. It's not a rigid regimen. It has a lot of freedom. It has the flexibility to include your favorite foods and your cultural foods. So for some people, it might look like a Mediterranean diet, but for others, it might look like a flexitarian, which is vegetarian plus some animal products, or pescatarian. It can also look like a vegetarian or a vegan diet. But regardless of what type of eating pattern you choose to follow, we do want to be mindful about the quality of food. So for example, somebody can follow a vegan diet, but if it's ultra processed food, that's not very helpful. And also, we definitely want to consider the adequacy, especially during active treatment. Some people can be very rigid and restrictive, and sometimes that can hurt them more if they're losing weight unintentionally, having very few options. Even if they're healthy, it can lead to malnutrition. So that's something to keep in mind, and variety. If you're eating well, if you're eating a plant-rich whole food diet, the more variety, the better, especially for our gut health, which is related to our immune system. Now, I like to share this slide or this chart. It kind of explains why the plant-rich whole food eating pattern is helpful for cancer fighting. So our body has different biological processes that are already intact. So things like repairing our DNA or preventing angiogenesis, which is the spread of cancer, or suppressing inflammation. All of these things, we do have mechanisms in our body. And on the right side, you can see that there are different nutrients that we get from whole foods that are shown to support them. So we'll cover them when we go through the grocery list, but like things like isothiocyanates or different vitamins, omega-3s, soy isoflavones, all of these things together synergistically from whole foods can support our body in terms of cancer fighting, whether it's to prevent an occurrence or a recurrence. And I do want to touch on a few food groups that are not recommended just for anybody with or without cancer diagnosis. So foods to avoid or minimize. Number one is alcohol, alcoholic beverages. There are different reasons why, but on the left side, there are different 4 ways that alcohol can cause cancer. First of all, ethanol in the alcoholic beverage is carcinogenic. When we consume alcohol, it creates another carcinogen in our body. And U.S. Surgeon General this year announced that alcohol is a leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S. It's number 3 preventable cause, and it affects so many cancer cases and cancer death each year. And less than half of the US adults are aware of this risk. And specifically, research has consistently shown that it increases the risk of at least 7 different types of cancer, and that includes breast cancer, colorectal, esophagus, liver, mouth, throat, and voice box. So if possible, avoid alcohol. If you enjoy it, save it for a special occasion. 1 drink per day for women, 2 drinks per day for men. But if you can avoid altogether, that's even better. Just one other group of foods to avoid completely or minimize would be processed meat. So that would be things like bacon, sausages, hot dogs, pepperoni, um, deli meat, things like that. And that's because compounds that are created from smoking, curing, or salting seem to be carcinogenic. And there's research that shows that for every 50 grams eaten daily may increase your risk of colorectal cancer by 16%. When it comes to whole red meat, unprocessed red meat, things like beef, lamb, and pork, the recommendation currently is to limit to less than 18 ounces per week. And we want to avoid cooking at a high temperature where we're barbecuing or charring the meat. So the blackened part is the carcinogen. So try to use a low heat cooking method. Things like soups and stews are great. If you are anemic, it can be a great source of iron. And if you do enjoy eating things like liver, that can be very beneficial if you're anemic. Another thing to minimize would be added sugars. So there's a lot of research looking at sugar sweetened beverages in particular. An average US adult consumes about 17 teaspoons of added sugars per day. But the concerning thing is that 1/3 of US adults who are the high consumers, they consume as much as 31 teaspoons or 124 grams of added sugars per day. And the recommendation is less than 12 teaspoons or 50 grams per day on a 2,000 calorie diet. Some people may need more or less calories, so you need to adjust based on that. And the thing with the high consumption of added sugars is that it can lead to weight gain, unwanted weight gain or overweight obesity, and more inflammation and elevated levels of insulin, and as well as insulin-like growth factors, which can promote the growth of cancers. So on the right-hand side, I have a little infographic of 13 different cancers that are associated with overweight and obesity. So, if we can minimize our added sugar intake, save it for a special occasion, save it for things that mean the most to you, and try to avoid or minimize the intake of sugar sweetened beverages. Now, the American Institute for Cancer Research, as well as American Cancer Society, and then this World Cancer Research Fund International is the sister organization to AICR. They have these 10 cancer prevention recommendations because we realize that nutrition is only one component of it. We want to take a holistic approach to see what we can do in terms of our overall lifestyle to reduce the risk of cancer. So take a look to see if you're already maybe able to check off a few things, more the better. There are multiple research that shows that by following these guidelines, not only does it decrease the risk of cancer occurrence or recurrence, it can also reduce the risk of mortality from cancer and other illnesses, including heart disease. And for each recommendation that we follow, the risk of cancer is shown to be postponed by 1.6 years. And another thing that I mentioned earlier is the importance of synergy. So synergy is when two things, multiple components combine together to produce a bigger result than individual components alone. So healthy diet and lifestyle is much more important than focusing on, like, let's say, like one single supplement or one micronutrient that might have cancer fighting effects. Now, let's go over practical tips for meal planning. We're going to go over grocery shopping and building balanced meals. So imagine you're at a grocery store. Let's start with the produce aisle. We know that produce like fruits and vegetables are big cancer fighters. There are no bad fruits or vegetables to include in your diet. Typically, the more colorful and darker pigments, the more nutrients they tend to have. So enjoy a variety, especially those that are in season. They tend to be more fresh and more affordable. And I just wanted to highlight a few of the vegetables that are shown to have a lot of cancer fighting properties. So things like dark leafy greens, they can be kale, but they can also be like baby spinach or other dark leafy greens that you like. Cruciferous vegetables. So those are vegetables from the broccoli family or radish family. I'm forgetting one other group, broccoli, radish, so things like broccolini would count, Brussels sprouts. Oh, I meant cabbage. Cabbage is another cruciferous family. Anything from that family would be good. Reds and oranges to get your carotenoids. So they can be like sweet potatoes, tomatoes, anything that's in the reds and oranges. And I wanted to highlight the benefits of avocados for the healthy fats, a variety of mushrooms, things like shiitake, maitake mushrooms especially, are shown to have cancer-fighting properties as well. And in terms of types of vegetables to get, you can always get raw veggies like radish, cucumber, baby carrots, celeries, cherry tomatoes. Those are just so easy to, you don't need to cook. They're ready to eat. So they're always good to have on hand. If you want to get salad kits, those are convenient options. Frozen mixed veggies are great. We know that frozen veggies are actually flash frozen at their peak, so they can be actually more nutrient dense or nutritious compared to fresh produce. And frozen fruits are also great to have on hand, as well as dried fruits with no added sugars. Now, dairy and soy. So I know there's a lot of mixed research about dairy, but for soy, we know that whole soy foods are considered safe, either at the worst neutral, at best very protective. So whole soy foods are safe to have. Things like tofu, edamame, if you like fermented soybeans like natto, soy milk, those are full of isoflavones, which is a cancer fighter. And when it comes to dairy, things like Greek yogurt or kefir, yogurt drink, they have a lot of probiotics that are good for our gut and our immune system. And if you choose to have other cheeses, things like cottage cheese that's high protein, and depending on your needs. If you are somebody who's trying to gain weight, then it's okay to get the full fat like whole milk, yogurt, whole milk, cottage cheese, etc. But if you don't necessarily need the extra calories or the extra saturated fat coming from animals, feel free to choose the non-fat or the low-fat versions. And then I also wanted to mention, in case you're lactose sensitive or you choose not to have dairy, non-dairy milk that's high in protein and high in calories would be something like soy milk or pea protein milk. So Ripple is a brand that produces pea protein milk. Moving on to seafood and poultry section, we know that omega-3s that we get from fatty fish is really good for anti-inflammatory purposes. So things like salmon or salmon patties that you can get from the frozen section, that's really easy to cook. Mackerel, anchovies, herring, those are great to have. And don't forget the canned sections, because canned sardines, salmon, and tuna, those are really easy, great source of protein to add to your meals. And you can have other shrimp, squid, mussels, clams, things like that for your lean protein. And chicken, ground turkey, and eggs are great sources of protein as well. Whole grains. There's so many different types of whole grains. I just listed some that I personally like. Oats, quinoa, barley, brown rice, wild rice, purple rice, farro. If you have a rice cooker, they're just easy to make and you can batch cook them, freeze individual portions for later. And things like Ezekiel bread or Ezekiel tortillas, those are great flourless sprouted grain options. And there's so many high fiber pasta options these days. Also buckwheat noodles like soba noodles can also be high fiber. And there are different whole grain crackers as well, seed crackers, etc., that are very nutritious and nutritious if you can tolerate fiber. Other pantry staples, different types of nuts and seeds, nut butter, seed butter, almond flour. I like to highlight things like ground flaxseed, chia, and hemp that can go like on top of your oatmeal or maybe in your smoothie. You get you get fiber, omega-3s that way. And things like beans and chickpeas and lentils, those are, very affordable superfoods that we don't eat enough of. And I know some people might think, oh, I get bloated or gassy with these things. And if that's the case, and if that's the case, some people might be able to tolerate a small amount. Maybe you need an adjustment period for your stomach to be able to handle those things. So, maybe try a small amount and see how it goes and gradually build up the tolerance if that's a concern. And other things to have on hand that might be helpful, things in like jars, like roasted bell peppers or artichokes, sun-dried tomatoes, to add more vegetables to your meals in a very convenient way. When it comes to oils, I like to get olive oil, avocado oil. I think the spray versions are great as well. And don't forget the herbs and spices, whether fresh or in a container, and seasoning blends. Seasoning blends can be so helpful when you're, cooking your protein or your vegetables, and we'll talk about roasted vegetables in a bit as well. And grab and go items can be so helpful if you're trying to eat healthy but you don't have time to cook. So things like salads, wraps, hummus, different dips, frozen veggie patties. There's one by Prager, I think it's Dr. Prager, California veggie patties. If you look at the ingredients, it's just vegetables. Baked falafels, for example. There's some low sugar protein bars that might be appropriate for you. And if you like chocolate, I recommend to pick one that's 70% or more higher in the cacao content to get the polyphenol contents. And for beverages, we do want to be hydrated throughout the day. Water, sparkling water, any kind of unsweetened tea or coffee. I wanted to highlight the benefits of green tea, matcha, ginger, turmeric tea for the cancer fighting properties. Ginger more so for nausea management. You can slice up ginger and put it in hot water to manage nausea. Pasteurized green juice, you can get pressed juice as well, but let's say you're in active treatment and you're blood counts, your white blood cell or neutrophil count is low, then you do want to make sure that everything that you consume is pasteurized, including dairy, including juices, all of that. Low sugar protein shakes and smoothies might be appropriate, but you can also make your own, which I will share in a bit. Prune juice if you're constipated. If you are looking for more of an electrolyte drink, you can get like unsweetened coconut water, different sports drinks, or electrolyte drinks. Nowadays there's like electrolyte powders that you can add. If you're in active treatment, just make sure that they don't have like high vitamins. Sometimes it might say like immune boosting, which sounds good, but if you're in active treatment with like chemo or radiation, for example, you don't want to get too much antioxidants from, supplements or in these electrolyte packets. So things like vitamins A, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, selenium, those things should not be exceeding the 100% of your daily value. And things like Pedialyte bone broth can be great. Non-alcoholic beverages, there are thankfully so many good options out there now. So take a look if you're trying to cut down on your alcohol intake. Now we're home. We went grocery shopping, we got all those things. When you do have all those things in the pantry, in the fridge, and the freezer, it makes it so much easier to, put together simple breakfast and lunch and snacks. So here are just some balanced breakfast ideas. When I say balanced, I'm looking at, does it have protein? Does it have maybe fresh fruit or vegetable? Does it have like a high fiber, starch? And I understand some of my patients cannot tolerate fiber for different reasons. Maybe they have, diarrhea. Maybe they're at a risk for bowel obstruction. And for those specific cases, I hope that you're working with a dietitian 101 to find things that work for you. But if you have no restrictions, then more fiber, the better. So, enjoy a variety. Things like Greek yogurt, oatmeal, chia pudding. There are high protein pancakes or waffles like the Kodiak brand, or make your own with almond flour. Avocado toast, omelet with different colored vegetables and mushrooms, low sugar granola that you can buy or make yourself, kefir with fruit, and smoothie again we'll talk about in a bit. And then if you're a fan of like Japanese breakfast, traditional Japanese breakfast might look like typically white rice with natto, which is fermented soybeans with like miso soup, but you can even go a step further and enjoy it with purple rice, which has like maybe 8 to 12 different grains that you cook in a rice cooker and you get multiple high fiber grains. Here are some balanced snack ideas. So again, I wanted to highlight what's a source of protein in yellow, so that you're pairing some kind of protein with some kind of maybe fruit or vegetable, and that can, be nourishing and satisfying and help you get through the day. So things like fruit with nut butter, hummus with veggies, maybe black bean dip with chips, tuna egg chicken salad with crackers or bread. That's always good. Mixed nuts with dried fruit, for example, cottage cheese with peaches and fruits, all great snack options. Now, when it comes to lunch and dinner, it can look different for everybody, but I'd like to use the healthy plate method, which you may be familiar with. It's just a visual idea that half of your meal is filled with colorful vegetables, a quarter of your meal is filled with lean protein, and a quarter of your meal is filled with, hopefully high fiber starch if you can tolerate. If not, white starch is okay too. You can always get fiber from your like plant-based protein or vegetables as well. So for instance, based on, our grocery list and what we talked about, for example, like what I had recently would be like I had an Ezekiel tortilla as my starch, and then for my protein, I had like canned salmon, and I made a little salmon salad instead of a tuna salad, and then I added raw veggies like just like baby spinach and sliced tomato, and then on top of it, on the side, I had like baby carrots with hummus. So I didn't really cook anything or make anything. I just put things together, but it was balanced and nutritious and it was delicious. And um, You can always, for added flavor, you can always add like eggplant dip, or if you want to like melt cheese on top of it or something like that, depending on your preference. Now, I'm gonna share some easy recipes: smoothies, roasted veggies, and sugar-free chocolate delights. So a lot of patients ask about smoothies. Smoothies are not a necessity, but I think it can be a great tool to have depending on what your needs are. Some people have smoothies, just as a breakfast option. Some people need to drink smoothies because they are going through, let's say, like a treatment for head and neck cancer, and the only thing they can drink is, it's a liquid, and they need to get the calories that way. So, different people have different needs and preferences, but some things are, there's a common theme. There are some things that are shared. So first, we need a type of liquid. It can be milk, kefir, non-dairy milk. Typically, we like to add some kind of fruit for the sweetness. It can be one serving or fresh, frozen, or dried fruits. And then if you like, you can add vegetables like dark leafy greens or other things like some people add like beets, or yesterday I had a patient who adds like tomatoes and broccoli into the smoothie, whatever you like. And things like nuts and seeds can be helpful. So nut butter, especially if you're trying to gain weight, and for the benefits of like the fiber and omega-3 and protein, you can add things like flax, chia, and hemp to your smoothie. So here's a little comparison of a simple smoothie recipe for somebody who wants to lose weight versus someone who wants to gain weight. So on the left side, if somebody wanted a smoothie, but don't get too many calories from it, but wanted to make sure they were having enough protein. And none of these recipes actually call for a protein powder. And nothing wrong with a protein powder, but if you wanted to make a smoothie with natural ingredients, you can. So here's how. So on the left side, you are using things like unsweetened soy milk, and you're adding half a cup of berries, a handful of spinach, and 1 tablespoon each of ground flaxseed and chia. You blend it up, it will look like a purple, like bluish purple smoothie, and that's very nutritious and not too high in calories, but it has 13 grams of protein. On the other hand, if you're somebody who's trying to gain weight, maybe pick something like Fairlife high protein whole milk. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically milk that has 50% more protein than a regular milk. They have the whole milk version as well as 2%, 1% non-fat, and I believe chocolate milk as well. And if you're trying to gain weight, that means maybe you have a decreased appetite. Maybe your stomach size is a little bit small. So you want to pick fruit that's not, too bulky. So maybe pick something like dates that are dried and, nutrient dense. So a quarter cup of pitted dates, it might look like 4 pitted dates. Add that for the sweetness. And you can still add spinach or other greens if you like, because they don't add too much bulk to the smoothie. But for the nuts and seeds part, you definitely want to add something like maybe natural peanut butter, like 2 tablespoons worth. That's close to 200 calories on its own. And when I say natural peanut butter, I mean the ingredient is only peanuts, no sugar, nothing added. And you can still add things like 1 tablespoon each of ground flax, chia, and hemp and blend it together. And that will have 615 calories, 30 grams protein. So that's more than the Boost Very High Calorie out there, which has 530 calories and 22 grams protein. And this one is, you have to make it, but at least you're controlling the ingredients and it's not as sweet, and there's no additives. And just another comparison, if you are having constipation or diarrhea, which are both very common because of treatment, etc. You still can have a smoothie. We just want to adjust the ingredient. So for constipation, especially if you're lactose sensitive, something like milk can actually be helpful to help to go to the bathroom. And you want to get a lot of insoluble fiber. So that's the fiber you get from the skin or seeds of fruits and vegetables. So things like dried fruits or dates would have a lot of insoluble fiber. So you want to pick fruits like that. And then for veggies, you might want to, get something more fibrous than baby spinach, which might be something like kale. And for the nuts and seeds, feel free to add the flax, chia, and hemp. And when it comes to nut butter, I would choose the chunky type of nut butter so that, it helps you to go to the bathroom more. And on the other hand, if you're having diarrhea, we want to be careful about not, upsetting your stomach further. So something like the Fairlife high protein milk can be beneficial because it's lactose free, but it has the extra protein. And for diarrhea, you want to get a lot of soluble fiber. So soluble fiber are found in like the meaty part of the fruit. So things like banana, you're peeling the skin, you're eating the inside, or maybe the inside of the apple, or peeled peaches, or peeled pears, where you're not eating the skin or the seed. But so this recipe calls for Fairlife lactose-free milk, banana, and then creamy peanut butter, not the chunky type, but the creamy one that's more gentle on your stomach. And then so you can see that for constipation, the smoothie has 13 grams fiber, but specifically rich in insoluble fiber. And for diarrhea, 5 grams of fiber, but rich in soluble fiber. Now we're quickly gonna go over how to roast any vegetable. And I decided to share this because, we're thinking about what's easy to do. And of course, raw veggies are easy to incorporate, salad kits are easy, but I think the next best thing is to use the oven where basically, you choose the vegetables of your choice. All you need is like olive oil, salt, pepper, and then maybe a seasoning blend if you like it. And leave it in the oven. And once it's done, you can repurpose it for so many different dishes. So you can have it as a side of a meal like dinner or lunch, but you can also put it in a wrap or a sandwich, a bowl. You can, so many ways to use them. So I just wanted to share how you can do that by kind of looking at the time. So all you need to do is to heat the oven to 425 degrees, chop up the vegetables of your choice in similar size pieces, and you want to toss it in olive oil and seasoning and spread it onto your baking sheet so it's not crowded. And you want to roast them until they're tender. You want to kind of mix them every 10 to 15 minutes. And if you are trying to roast different vegetables at the same time, you may want to stagger them. So just start out with, vegetables that take the longest and then add the, other vegetables as you go along. And then lastly, I will share this very easy to make. I just made it again over the weekend. It's sugar-free chocolate balls with walnuts, dates, and coconuts. So all you need is 5 different ingredients. There's no baking, there is no melting chocolate or anything like that, and it's sugar-free. All you need are walnuts, dates, vanilla extract, cacao powder, and desiccated coconut. If you don't have desiccated coconut, which is like a powdery coconut, you can just get dried coconut and then kind of use the blender to make it more fine, which is what I did. So the final result looks like this. They're very good. So what you do is, if you want to start out with, blending the coconut, dry coconut to make it into a powder, do that first, put it aside. And then after that, all you do is either use a food processor or a blender. And you're just going to add walnuts and dates. So dates are pitted and chopped. They don't have to be finely chopped because you're using the processor and or the blender anyway. You mix it until they're blended. And then you're just going to add the vanilla extract and cacao powder, and then you mix it again, and it turns into a brown mixture. You remove that from the blender or the food processor. You make it into a little ball like this, and then in a little small bowl where you have the coconut powder, you're just going to kind of toss it and roll it around so it's coated nicely. And that's it. It's ready to eat. You can keep it in the fridge. I think it tastes good when it's cold as well. And this recipe, see this recipe, yeah, this recipe is supposed to make 12 chocolate balls, but when I made it, it somehow ended up being 10 because I think I made them too big. But regardless, they're delicious. They do stay in the fridge for up to a week. If you have leftovers, you can store them in the freezer. And finally, I wanted to share some recipe resources because I get asked a lot about, where to find more recipes. And I think there's so many good resources, but I just wanted to share a few. One of them is cookforyourlife.org. It is supervised by an oncology dietitian, I believe up in Seattle. And I like that you can filter it by, if you can see on the right side, like 3 steps or less, or 5 ingredients or less, or budget friendly. So depending on your needs, you can kind of filter whatever recipe you're looking for. And Cancer Nutrition Consortium is another resource to look up nutrient-dense cancer-fighting recipes. And then finally, cookanyday.com is a resource for everything that's microwavable. So if you have a steamer or the Anyday cookware, which is basically a steamer, you can use the microwave to cook all of these dishes, including protein and mixed dishes and etc. So in conclusion, here's just some of the key takeaways from our workshop today. Cancer fighting eating pattern consists of a variety of plant-based whole foods that are adequate to meet your nutrition needs. It can look different from person to person, and that's the best part. It's not a one diet that you need to follow. And rest assured that current research shows that it is safe to incorporate some dairy, meat, sugar, and whole soy foods even after a cancer diagnosis. And when it comes to eating well, planning is key to build balanced meals and snacks that are nourishing and enjoyable so that you have all the ingredients and tools necessary at your hands. And healthy eating can be a little bit intimidating at times, but it is a lifelong journey. And the more you do it, the better you will get, and it gets easier. So that concludes my workshop. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. Let's take a look. Now I see 10 questions. Okay, so the first question, I'm gonna read it out loud. How much fruit is safe or recommended to have during cancer treatment? Also, how much lemon juice should I have in my daily green juicing to not detox the medicine I'm taking, targeted therapy? Okay, so how much, you can have as much fruits and vegetables as you like, with the exception that if you're I've had a patient who was juicing so much fruits and vegetables that it was causing like toxicity, like vitamin A toxicity. So if you're having so the recommendation is, maybe like 7 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day if you can get them down. One serving of fruit would be like one medium apple is one serving. For vegetables, cooked vegetables would be, half a cup is one serving. For leafy vegetable, 1 cup would be one serving. So unless you're doing it excessively, there's no restriction. And lemon juice as well. So typically when we say don't take too much antioxidants during chemo or radiation, and in your case, you're getting, you're receiving targeted therapy as well. So it's not a concern, but definitely you can have as much lemon juice as you like in the green juice. So not a problem. And even for somebody going through chemotherapy or radiation therapy, we're not concerned about getting too much antioxidants from fruits and vegetables if it's a normal intake, not like excessive, like, I don't know, 15, 20 servings of like carrots or carrot juice every day. I hope that helped. Yes, great question about, can you address, I'm just going in order from the questions that came in. Can you address eating organic versus non-organic? Yes, I think that's a very important point. So the short answer is that, 80% of Americans don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. So that's the bigger concern than the, pesticide residuals in our produce. And something to keep in mind is that even organic produce, they're allowed to use pesticides, just, natural pesticides. So if you choose to have organic produce, that's not a problem, and people do that for different reasons, for the environment, etc. But when it comes to, you know, when it comes to is it safe to eat conventional produce, it is considered safe to eat conventional produce. There's a good website um, called, I have to pull it up, but it's basically a pesticide calculator. You put in, are you an adult? Are you male or female? What's your height, body weight? And then let's say you pick like strawberry. How many strawberries can you eat until you reach a threshold that's considered dangerous for your body, and it's the amount that you cannot possibly eat. And there is an argument that the current regulation is not tight enough, and in this country, and that's another topic. But in terms of generally speaking, we want to be thinking about, if you can afford to eat organic, all